figured I'd go ahead and start on this video while I have the time to do it. I might not make another video until next month. We'll see. And today we're going to talk about camouflage. In the world of camouflage, there's two major categories: military and hunting. I'm just going to talk about hunting camouflage today. A few caveats. I'm not an expert. There are people out there who probably know far more than I do. I'm probably not going to get all the names and terminology correct. And there's a lot of details that I might forget to mention. So, let's get started. Well, what exactly is the purpose of camouflage? My understanding of camouflage in general, the purpose of it is to visually blend into your environment. It does this by two different means. To break up the human form, the human silhouette, so as to make it harder to distinguish from the environment, and also to use a color palette that is matching the environment that you're in. So, purpose and out of the way, the next question is how important is camo? That entirely depends on the hunt. I break up camo in two different criteria as to how important it is while hunting: turkey and big game. Camo is far more important turkey hunting than it is big game hunting. The reason is you have to look at what you're hunting. Turkeys have better vision than ungulates, elk and deer, and they have better vision than you or I do. I wrote some statistics down just to put it in perspective as to how good turkey vision really is. Their field of view is about 270 degrees. Their visual acuity is about on par with an 8-power pair of binoculars. And the real take-home point here is that their retinas have 7 photoreceptors, whereas we have 4. And with each one of those 7 photoreceptors, they have 1 rod and 6 cones. Whereas compared to each one of our 4 photoreceptors, we have 1 rod and 3 cones. Turkeys can also see ultraviolet. So their visual acuity and the colors that they can see are far greater than anything else. So obviously camo is of greater importance while turkey hunting. It is less important while hunting ungulates, deer, and elk. That's not to say it is not important, it is just less important. To put this on par, to put it in perspective, and I'll include some links that study deer vision, and by extension elk vision, to much greater detail if you're interested in that. And I find it fascinating reading, by the way. But to a deer, their field of view is about 310 degrees, so they can see really far apart. They have low visual acuity because they have a broader field of vision. And they're dichromatic, which means they only see in 2 colors, green and blue, I think. They don't see in red, which is why hunter orange doesn't cue them off. So the importance of camo really does vary on what you're hunting. All right, purpose and importance out of the way. Let's talk about the types of camo that you're going to see in the hunting world. There's 3 main types. The first, which is what I have over here, this is called mimic or mimicry. And this is your there's 2 major brands that you're going to find in this, generally speaking. They're not the only brands, but there's the 2 major brands that people think of when they think of mimic camouflage, and that is realtree and mossy oak. I'll bring this in closer so you can see it. This is mimic camo. It mimics the environment, leaves, branches, that type of thing. Hence the name mimic. Pros and cons of mimic camo is it's cheap. Generally speaking, mimic camo is cheap. It's affordable. And it works. Cons of mimic camo is that it's usually made of cotton or some type of cotton blend, and I'll get into that later. It fades, but again, I'll get into that later when I get into materials. The second type of camo that you're going to encounter, and unfortunately I don't really have any good example of it because one of the cons of this stuff is it's usually expensive, is what's called breakup or disruption. The only example I can give to you is this bit of UCP, which I'm going to say right now this is probably a very poor example. Breakup camo is often digital, not always digital, but often it's digital. It mimics no leaves, branches, or anything like that, but all it does is it breaks up the shape by putting irregular splotches in there. A lot of your big name, most expensive camo, this is what it tries to do. I'm just going to say that this UCP, I just have to get this out of the way, this is what happens when the Good Idea Fairy gets hammered on soju and then pukes up in the city gutter. You get UCP. That's how you get UCP. The pros of breakup camo is that I'm not entirely sure, but I think it does a better job of breaking up your outline. It's what it's mainly meant to do. The cons, as I've already mentioned, is this stuff is usually very pricey, which is why I don't own any. And the third type of camo, which you may rarely see in a hunting world, it does exist in various forms, is three-dimensional camo, like a ghillie suit. You can't, as far as concealment goes, you're not going to get much better if you get the right type of ghillie suit action going on. This is just one example. We used a little bit of this last turkey season. The pros of this stuff, you get the right color blend and it offers the best concealment you can get. The cons, though, it's bulky. It makes getting into your gear hard. It's hot, and it snags in just about everything. So with the three different types of camouflage out of the way, mimic, breakup, three-dimensional, I want to talk about the material that whatever hunting clothes you're thinking about are made out of. This is almost important, maybe even a little bit more important than the actual camouflage pattern itself. Now, the first material that you might encounter is anything made out of 100% cotton. The only example I can give to you of that is maybe some Cryptek. They put out a couple of pants and shirt that I believe are 100% cotton. The advantage of 100% cotton is that it is quiet, but the cons outweigh the pros. The only pro I can think of is 100% cotton. I mean quiet. All the cons, in general, anything 100% cotton is a really bad idea. I'm sure everyone's heard the phrase cotton kills. Cold and wet with cotton is a recipe for hypothermia, and it's not hard. All it takes is going up on a turkey hunt, wearing a cotton t-shirt, sweating your butt off going up the mountain, and you sit down, you throw on a coat or whatever, and then you've got the soaking wet t-shirt underneath everything. And that just saps all the heat out of you. Yeah, ask me how I know. So the next type of material that you may encounter is a 50-50 blend of cotton and polyester. Generally speaking, the more polyester that is put into the material, the better off you are in terms of how that garment will perform when wet. However, a polyester cotton blend, if you get cold, or if you get wet and it's cold outside, you're still going to get hypothermic. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention about both 100% cotton and also applies to any type of cotton blend, including 50-50, is that it fades. This shirt here is a 50-50 cotton polyester blend. Actually, it's a 50-50 cotton twill. I prefer twill because it is quiet. If I'm going to go with a cotton blend of anything, I prefer twill as opposed to ripstop because twill is much more quiet in the woods. And generally speaking, 50-50 cotton poly twill is durable. The only major con, two major cons of this stuff, it fades and has poor performance when wet and cold. The next type of material that you're going to encounter, particularly nowadays, and it's kind of hard to find stuff that isn't this, truthfully sometimes, is a 70-30 polyester cotton blend, ripstop. 70% polyester, 30% cotton, which is what these pants are. They perform a little bit better when wet, not by much. I find they are a little bit more wind resistant. They also fade. So I'll give a close-up of that here. You might be able to see the little squares in there. Right there. It's durable, however, it still fades. You usually find this poly cotton in tactical wear. You'll find it in some hunting wear too. Usually you find it in the tactical world. The big problem I have with poly cotton, the 70-30 blend, is that it's loud. When you first wash it and then you wear it in the field and you're walking, I find it loud. This stuff actually, once you've worn this for about 3 days in the field is when it starts being quiet. At least that's what I find. So I try to avoid polycotton when I can, polycotton when I can. The last material that you're going to encounter is a modern polyester or a polyester spandex blend. This shirt right here is, I believe, like 90% polyester and 92% polyester and 8% spandex. I typically wear this as a base layer. Wicks away moisture pretty good, but you can tell it's made out of a stretchy material. This stuff is pretty good. However, this catches burrs like no one's business. I was constantly picking burrs out of this last archery season. And this here is, I'm not sure what type of blend it is. I think it's pretty much all polyester. It's all on how they made it. And as you can tell from this material, it's completely different than a twill, a pot collie twill. My reasons for moving into this stuff is mainly because of better weather performance in inclement weather. In any type of situation where you're encountering cold weather mixed with wet garments. This material will dry faster than anything made out of cotton. Anything made out of this material is also a bit more pricey. Another thing to mention about this newer materials made out of mostly polyester is that they don't fade like anything made out of cotton. I've had this shirt and shirts like this for several years, and not a stitch of fading on them at all. So the durability of this in terms of maintaining the camouflage pattern on there is far better than anything that is blended with cotton. But again, you pay for performance. Now, stuff like this you can usually buy off of Midway USA for cheap. at least as a base layer. This stuff here is in the story, and I'll get to that towards the end of the video. I guess the obvious question becomes, does one need to buy a lot of camo? Do I need to buy the more expensive camo, the stuff made out of technical material or whatever you want to call it? And I think the answer to that depends entirely on you as the individual. If you're like a one-season warrior, you just go out and hunt the same hunting season every year, maybe, which for some people might be 4 days out of the year or 2 weeks out of the year, whatever it may be, in August or whatever, then probably not. Because camo is only so effective. It's not what makes or breaks the hunt. Now, if you're a huntaholic, me, definitely a huntaholic, then making an investment into better camo is more worthwhile, because you're outside more, you're in the outdoors more, and your likelihood of encountering scenarios where you're going to get cold and wet are much greater than someone who just goes out one weekend or one hunting season a year. So it depends. One season warrior? Nah. You really don't need to spend a lot of money on camo. Huntaholic? Buy once, cry once. Now, regardless if you're a huntaholic or a one-season warrior, whatever camo you're wearing, it doesn't do you a lick of good if you're making lots of movement, especially with turkeys. Deer pick up movement pretty good too. If you're making lots of noise, camo's not going to help you there. If you're not playing the wind, that's actually some of the best camouflage you can have while big game hunting is playing the wind. The wind decides everything. They'll smell you before they see you. In fact, most game animals, aside from turkey, most large game, their main defenses are their nose and their ears, and then their eyes. So camo is kind of low on the concealment tree there. And camo doesn't do you much good if you're walking through open fields. You know, you got to skirt around those, or you're skylining yourself walking a ridge. And camo doesn't do you much good if you don't
stick to the shadows,
especially while you're turkey hunting. And I'll throw in a couple pictures that I took while I was out turkey hunting when I was experimenting with placing camo. In these pictures, one is King's Camo Desert Shadow versus King's Camo Mountain Shadow. King's Camo Desert Shadow will be on the left, and then Mountain Shadow will be on the right. And I'll flash through some pictures, random pictures. And what I want you to notice in those pictures is how the pattern disperses the form, and also the glare, and how useless that camo is in sunlight. And you can apply that to most camo, so stick to the shadows when you can. A little harder to do when you're big game hunting. Don't fall for the hype.
Got it out of a catalog when I was with DC SWAT. Called it Gucci Flush.
Gucci Flush.
You gonna wear that?
Ain't no room for Peter Pan on this hunt.
Just to play down all the hype that camo companies put out, this here is a pair of BDU pants. 50% cotton, 50% polyester. I think I spent maybe $24 on this off of Amazon. And this is one of my base layers that I used during last year's archery hunt. I think I maybe paid 20 bucks for this. So $50 total, tops, between the top and the bottom. If that. And this is what I was wearing when I killed my elk last year. So don't follow for the Gucci camo suit. You really, when it comes down to brass tacks, as long as you're wearing colors that are somewhat similar to your environment, and your outline is being broken up, it works. There is something to be said about using a different colored bottom and top, because that splits your silhouette in half. And a lot of camo at distance will, especially being used, will blob up and to look like one solid shape. So don't fall for the hype. A lot of it is BS. And if you look at their websites, especially Realtree, I haven't bought a whole lot of mossy oak, but Realtree, whenever they come out with a camo pattern, if you look closely at their pictures with a critiquing eye, you'll notice that they actually use a very subtle filter on the photography to where a Realtree Max 1 XT, and I'll bring that out later in the video, they use like a very subtle like red brown filter to make it look like it's blending in more than it really does. It's all camera tricks on their website. Don't fall for it. Manufacturers are always coming up with new camo, and I think they do it to stay relevant. New camo patterns. I think they do it to stay relevant and to get people to buy more so they can make more money. At the end of the day, it's all about making money, right? Like, I've had these for a few years. This is Realtree Extra, and I've typically been using this in April, before spring green out, and into the fall. During the month of May, I've been using Realtree Extra Green, exclusively for turkey hunting. You might be able to tell, here's Extra and Extra Green. So, now for a few years, that was Realtree's flagship pattern is Extra and Extra Green. And then sometime last year, they came out with Realtree Edge. And they did away with these two patterns. So these two patterns are obsolete. They don't no longer make these, which is kind of a bummer on the Extra Green. Now this is Realtree Edge. The point is that they're constantly coming out and updating their camo lines. You don't need to buy the latest and greatest. It doesn't really matter that much. The only reason why to buy camo, if you've already got a system going, is either to upgrade on materials, which is really what I've been doing, or you don't have part of a layering system. This here is actually a raincoat. Since by the time I purchased this Realtree Extra is already out the window, so I purchased it in Realtree Edge. So, don't fall for the hype. You don't need the latest and greatest. The deer, the elk, and the turkeys, they don't care if you're wearing Gucci flage. They don't really care. Honest. And speaking of how camo companies are constantly updating their lines, that leads me to my next point. There is a time to buy up camo. You gotta pay attention to when camo companies come out with a new pattern, because the instant they update their pattern, for instance, when Realtree came out with Realtree Edge, all the retailers, Midway USA and every other retailer I can think of, they were looking to offload Extra and Extra Green. So this stuff came up on clearance. So if you see a new pattern come up, just keep in mind that all the retailers are going to want to offload whatever they have of the old stock to make way for the new hotness.
I drive the new hotness. Old and busted, new hotness.
That's basically how it works, and that is the time to buy. You don't need the latest camo pattern, as I've already said, but when they come out with a new camo pattern, that means that clearance and closeout sales are coming. Also, if there's a new line, some camo companies will come out with a new line every year or every so often. I have some King's Camo that I've been buying up, and I'll bring that out a little bit later. And the only reason why I'm buying the stuff now is because they don't have their new stock in. Their old stock has been on closeout sale, and I'm buying the stuff for 50% off. if it was not for that sale, I would not be upgrading right now. So that's my point, is there is a time to buy camo. So you have to pay attention to the industry, really, as far as new patterns or if they're coming up with an annual line of clothing. That's how you get a whole system going. That's how you save your money. As an aside, when you do go to buy camo, kind of look around, because there's a lot of different patterns, but you try to find a pattern that will work best in whatever area you live in. But also, I would suggest finding a pattern that is lighter in its tones. The reason is that black, really dark colors aren't very common in nature, and what makes things actually darker is shadows. Not necessarily that because they're already black, but because the shadows make them black. So if you have something that's tan and you're in the shade, it's going to get darker because that is a more natural color tone. And darker tone camo tends to blob up, like this ghillie suit here, this ghillie top. You can already tell that it has several different colored strands in it, but just from here, when the camera's maybe 5 feet away, you can already tell it's blobbing up. Now these are two different King's Camo that I've been bought for pants, and you can tell by the light that the darker areas will tend to blob up and the lighter areas create a break in the pattern. Same thing over here. Whereas with medium pants, the color tone is much more darker, so at a farther distance, this is going to blob up. Alright, I'll give you my thoughts on the individual camo patterns. This is actually the first camo that I bought. This is Realtree Max 1 XT. And it's billed as like all-purpose. It's not. This pattern, I think, is mainly good for big game hunting. And if that's all you do, it will work. I have Realtree Max 1. Where I live, I think this is probably the most versatile pattern that there is, and it's useful for most situations. Realtree Extra, I find that useful for April and also October, November. Realtree Extra Green has been my go-to pattern for turkey hunting. And then Realtree Extra, not sure what I think about it. I think it's trying to mimic breakup patterns more, because if you can kind of picture this as digitized, it's more busy than Realtree Extra. So a lot more busy, whereas in this one you'll see these gaps. And this one, they try to fill in the gaps with like some extra texturing. So there's not as much dead space in this pattern as the other extras. And that leads me to King's Camo, which is what I'm switching to. This is King's Camo Desert Shadow. And it's the closest match to Realtree Max 1, which is, so I suspect this is going to be the most versatile pattern. However, I'm also going with this one as well, which is Mountain Shadow, which seems to be somewhere in between Extra and Extra Green. Bit darker, more splotchy. So that's just a quick overview of these patterns. I think that about covers it. I'm sure there's something I'm forgetting that I'll remember later, but I think this video has gone on long enough. If you've actually managed to watch it to this point, well, congratulations, you made it through a long spiel. I think most people will have clicked off this video in the first 7 to 9 minutes. So if you made it this far, it means you're really interested in camo and are trying to learn something. Or you've met me in person and are amazed at how talkative I can actually be. Because usually I don't talk much in person. So, that's all I've got. I probably won't make any more videos until I'm out scouting. I'll record my scouting trips for posterity along with my own stupidity. And, yeah, have a good one.